Mason de Chaucheur, Swiss, cohort 9, and I'm here to address change in the Swiss private banking industry. Now I'm trying to figure out, since this session, whether the industry is exploding or imploding, or maybe both, and you can help me with that later. Swiss private banking, as banking in general, is undergoing a lot of change and a lot of pain. Since 2008, everyone is loath to even admit that they're affiliated in any way with banking. There has been change, however. In 2008, or very soon thereafter, if you were at a cocktail party and you had to admit what you do, it would raise anger and indignation. Now, however, you admit what you do, and you are the subject of abject pity. So you can decide which is better. Now, that's really too bad, not just for the obvious reasons, but allegedly 85% of the world's financial wealth is in private hands. And a little over 30% recently was managed by Swiss banks and Swiss private banks. Now, Geneva is a good place to be because most of the Swiss private banks are in Geneva. There's Pictet, number 1, Lombard-Odier, Mirabeau, and Bordier. But the wealth management departments of UBS in first place, Credit Suisse in second place, are the ones managing most of that still. But JP Morgan is right behind on its heels, and other foreign banks. The sector of Swiss private banking in particular is shrinking and shrinking fast. KPMG came out with a report not long ago saying that within the next 2 to 3 years, 25 to 30% of all Swiss private banks would simply disappear, maybe through mergers, but some would just fail. There are cross-border problems. Swiss private bankers are really under attack. Now, let's take a look at what's happening through, I would say, first of all, attire, appearance. Now, here's the picture. Appearance is presumed to be pretty superficial. Let me tell you, in banking and private banking, it's everything. These are happier days. You can perhaps discern where I am. I was part of a small investment management team in a niche private bank. You could probably call that the lady in red. I think she's a little over the top there. Bless her heart, I haven't seen her for years. The photographer on that day said, wear something red, so we all play the game, to distinguish yourselves from the sort of dull and somber attire of the day. And so there we are, and we were still happy and proud of our profession. We were doing something important, and we were very serious, even though we were dressed a little bit in red. Since then, in terms of appearance and attire, what has happened? There's a book which has been written recently by 2 academics, Admati and Hellwig. The dust jacket, which I'll bring up now, shows you what they think is happening to the banking profession in general. These are the bankers' new clothes. They've been stripped bare. Can you imagine on these guys on Casual Friday, where these guys decide, we're going to remove our ties. And someone would come up and say, please put your ties back on. Don't you realize that without your ties, you're completely naked? I mean, you know. The profession is being stripped bare, and it has serious problems. Now let's take a look at the financial model. What's happened to the business model? I think the business model is actually broken. Very simple. If you look at costs, administration, compliance departments, legal departments, and so on, they've more than doubled. If you take a look at revenues, I'd say they're halved, or even a little bit worse. On the cost side, you have basically since 2008, Frank Dodd in the US, and what we're doing is re-regulating. Glass-Steagall is being re-regulated. Frank Dodd is bring back regulation. Don't separate investment banking from traditional banking. So Frank Dodd has given rise to the Europeans that have now MiFID, which is Markets in Financial Instruments directives. Now, that has been so complicated and so costly that the regulators decide, this has been a great success. It's like a blockbuster in Hollywood. We'll now have a sequel. MiFID I is now followed by MiFID II. Very expensive. Then the European Market Regulatory Commission came in and said it will have EMIR. Now, EMIR sounds like it would be a Turkish aristocrat. It's not. EMIR stands for European Market Regulatory Authority. And on top of that, the Americans, of course, have gotten into the act because they have the power to do so. So they want everybody to be compliant with their fiscal regulations. So there's FATCA, which is the foreign regulatory mechanism for foreign accounts for tax compliance acts. That has not yet been implemented. Nobody knows exactly what the cost will be to implement it. It's been like James Cameron with Avatar. Halfway through, he wasn't quite sure whether he'd be able to finish and how much it would cost. Nobody knows where we're going with that. FINMA, which is the Swiss Financial Markets Authority regulatory mechanism, has decided that whereas Switzerland used to have risk-based regulation, it now also has to include rule-based. So it's at least twice as expensive as it used to be. So that's on the cost side. And so the future in careers now is basically in legal and compliance. Investment managers, not looking for many anymore. Clients, I'll come to that, if there are some. Anybody here interested in opening up an account? It's rough. On the revenue side, clients demand, first of all, they don't, after 2008, they don't trust markets. They don't particularly like bankers. They're very suspicious. And unfortunately, they have reason to be. So they want more transparency. They want simpler products. They don't want structured products. They don't want middlemen. They don't want intermediaries. They have a real problem with trusting their banker. And so what's really happening in the industry is that if I ask people, what does the future look like? What is there a future? They say, well, basically, you have to embrace the new regulations, and you have to have client trust, so you're better off being either on your own, small, or specialized. Big banks are not that way. And in fact, the big banks are surviving, but they have in fact downsized tremendously. UBS, Credit Suisse, they've all downsized. They survived because instead of having 150,000 people, they're down to 75,000 people, and it's still big. There is, if we look out at 2020, what does the future hold? The future beyond this mess. There is a group in Geneva which is looking at sustainable finance. It's called SFG, Sustainable Finance Geneva. I met some of them. They're good people. In fact, we could admit them into the change leaders. They really have the same values we do. They have two pillars of principle. The first is to become client-centric and establish trust within a long-term perspective. It's very, very commendable. I like it. The second pillar of principle is to foster and encourage competition, growth, within an appropriate legal framework. Also very commendable. And then on top of that, they then add various different principles of operation, social responsibility, corporate governance responsibility, green investing, and so on. Marvelous. The problem is that I see between what I'm living through, because I'm there, and what they want, a huge gap. So if I put myself in the role of a consultant, and in a way my bank is asking me to do some of that in-house, you look around at the private bankers, and first of all, they're not on your level. They're in the trenches. You know, they feel as if there's a war going on, and they're down in the trenches. So you have to clamber down into the trenches with them, and you find they're wearing helmets and protective gear. You try and talk to them. They go, "What? Can I lift up the flap of your helmet, please?" "Yeah, what is it?" And they're ducking. And you try and tell them about a future, and they don't see much because there's gun smoke all over the place. At least that's what they perceive. So the consultant would have to, and the question is, can we do it as, the change leaders, get them to take off their protective gear, put aside their helmets, lay down their weapons, climb out of the trenches, and they're not very enthusiastic about doing that, and then explain to them that if they were to walk through the smoke and the fog, on the other side there are Elysian fields of sustainable finance Geneva. And I can imagine the commentary would be, you're talking to me about Elysian fields? I have to die first? Maybe not so bad, okay. But then, and I can believe in reincarnation. I have maybe a future, but never again as a banker. Oh, no, I'm sorry. A Hollywood producer maybe, an actor, but no. Banker, s'il vous plaît, come on. Look, you know. And so the question then is, this is the challenge. How do we close the gap, and how do we walk with some comfort in the future, into the future? Thank you.